In this video, I want to talk about some of the most recent record-breaking anomalous weather for New York City and its surrounding metro area. I know you're getting tired of boring weather videos, but this one will actually be a little bit more exciting. So, as we know, it's hard for CPK itself to break records. It's just not easy. The reason why is because the records go back so long, they encompass so much stuff, and we have such a long period of keeping records to the point where it's not easy for new ones to be established. So it has to contend with hundreds of years of data. I think a century and a half of data is what it has to contend with in reality. That's still a lot, though. In order for it to be set, it has to be more on record low temperatures, less than anything that's happened in 150 years of record keeping. And especially with that changing climate, even record highs are starting to become more rare. We don't have record dew points. Those are only kept in extremely rare situations. And we don't have record wind chills. So I do want to talk about, though, and bring in other metro sites. I think that other metro sites can still be relevant in this context. And you know, and I want to talk about some of this anomalous weather that has occurred, and we have to expand to other weather sites if we want a chance to be able to do that, unfortunately. So, as far as anomalous weather goes, the first stop that we can really make is going to be the 12th of November. In the wake of Nicole, every single metro site except CPK either broke or tied a record for weather that day. Temperatures largely ranged in the 70s and upper 60s. And some records were literally set the year before as another coastal storm bore through the area. Actually, no, it wasn't a coastal storm, it was a front. The front actually dropped an EF1 tornado, and because of the way fronts work around here is that they almost always bring rain, no matter what month it is, and you really can't have fronts in the midst of a polar vortex. You just can't. Because you need to have warm air collide with cold air. So if that warm air is 31 degrees and you're having snow already, that's a problem. Sometimes fronts can bring snow on the back end of them, but that's rare. That would be like as rain changes to snow. Again, not saying it's impossible. You can have nasty fronts in 40-degree temperatures, and then yes, it will drop to 15 and become snow, but that's not common. So as far as the anomalous weather goes, that was highly anomalous. Nicole dropped 0.9 inches of rain, and because, again, it was a tropical cyclone, it brought a tropical feeling to the air. There weren't that many flooding problems across the New York metro area. Only about 900 people combined lost power. And the reason why was because Nicole wasn't that nasty for storms in the first place. It was certainly no Hurricane Ian. And once it got past Florida, it really began to lose it. So the last major bits of information that I heard out of Nicole were the North Carolina and Virginia severe storms. There's barely any information covering Nicole's impacts in our area, and that is the absolute last place where impacts coverage will occur. But the weekend and the Monday before also saw highly anomalous weather. So the weather that we saw those times was more record high temperatures due to a November heat wave. Pretty much after a very cold end of September and cold start to October, all of a sudden it seemed that the heat switch was pulled on out of nowhere. But it was always wobbling between warm and cold. It was never any kind of consistent warmth that was reliable in any way. It was always this kind of weird, ugly mix. So never any reliable warmth. It was always, you know, and I feel like on October 24th, while taking a Stony Brook tour, it was drenching out there. Now, Baden Hollow can see some of the heaviest rain on Long Island. The nor'easter that generally dumped 3 to 4 inches of rain back in late October 2021, which I'll have to see if I can mention that. That dumped 8.7 inches of rain in Baden Hollow. It was the heaviest amount seen from the storm. So these storms can be nasty. And all of a sudden, we had near record warm low temperatures. I think Iceland might have set a record one of the days. And while, yes, there was one injection of cold that begun on Friday, kind of ended on Sunday, once November began, out of the gate, it seemed anomalously warm. And from the 4th into the 5th, 6th, and 7th, the heat mainly just seemed to kept building. Central Park set a record on one of these days. It tied the record low of 66, which also tied as the second warmest low temperature in November. And a lot of places in the Northeast actually saw a record warm November low that night of November 6th. Plus, I think Portland, Maine was 59. Some places in upstate New York were like in the mid-60s. So it was either very close to setting a record warm November low if it didn't set one. And it did break the record high of the day with a high of 75 degrees, which inconveniently was actually the day of the New York City Marathon. Typically, temperatures you want them to be running in the, from what I've heard, you want them to be running in around 50 degrees. It was not good weather for marathon. And it led to some pretty slow times. The whole reason why the marathon was moved in the first place was that runners wouldn't have to contend with warm temperatures. This year was unfortunately an outlier. 3 other metro sites also set record highs that day, and 3 set record highs the day before. Although Central Park did not, but it was still the warmest November day there in 19 years, even though that day temperatures actually got higher at 76 degrees. This is when humidity was starting to build, and it was exceptionally humid on November 6th. By the 7th, it was just pure hot. 77-degree temperatures in the city, and that was the cold spot of the metro area, as most of the metro area flirted with 80. Islip at 80 and Bridgeport at 79 set record highs for the entire month of November. Meanwhile, not only were the record highs in the entire month of November being accomplished in parts of the metro area, every single place except Central Park did set a daily temperature record, and quite a few places actually did hit the 80s in November. I know further southwest, New Orleans set a record high in November of 90. Some places saw their warmest day so late in the year, one of the warmest days so late in the year, when this anomalous heat events passed through. However, there were no record warm November lows. Central Park would have set one had the low of 68 held, which is the lowest it got in the morning. Problem was that by 8 p.m. an Arctic injection of air came in, or not really Arctic, but a cold blast of air came in. Temperatures fell to 54 at midnight, which was only 10 degrees above average at that point. And by November 8th, it was substantially colder, as temperatures were only in the low 40s that morning and wouldn't hit 60 degrees. So that was pretty anomalous. Hurricane Ian was definitely pretty anomalous. However, I have to say it was really southern New Jersey, even a little bit into Philly. But really, New Jersey was where the upper low stalled. New Jersey saw the 10th wettest October on record. Some places in New Jersey saw 8 inches in just the first 3 days. Now, as far as New York City goes, in the metro area, JFK set a record low high of 52 degrees on October 3rd. Newark tied it. Both these airports and LaGuardia would set rainfall records on October 4th, the next day. But unfortunately, Central Park couldn't because they were the only ones to see records in the 1870s when October 4th actually dumped 4 inches of rain on the area from another tropical cyclone. So now you'll see why records are so hard to be broken here. But the lead up to Ian was also quite fascinating. Here's why the lead up to Ian was pretty fascinating. So, you already had the cold conditions building for a while. It was already seemingly getting cold for a while. Hurricane Fiona rattled the jet stream, bringing cold temperatures into New York on the 23rd. They warmed up on the 25th, and then a thunderstorm dumped 1.1 inches of rain. While not a record for the date, it is one of the most least likely dates to see measurable rain. Of course, less rain fell east of the city and more rain fell west of the city. Which is good for Newark after encountering their driest July and hottest August on record. I would also see the hottest August on record, but that's a story for another time. So it got warm again, but then it began to get cold. It began to cloud up. As Ian moved its way further to the north, more and more of Ian could be seen. I think there's a point where Ian's cloud stretched into Canada. And then what happened on October 1st and even 2nd was just the normal remnants of a storm. It's just that it then became cut off on October 2nd, and it really stayed here until October 5th. I think our total rainfall was 3.28 inches. Obviously nowhere near record territory, but still notable. But the events happening before it also got quite a bit of media attention. That being said, there wasn't really that much noteworthy weather in September. And even August felt lacking because of the fact that the record warm highs really just couldn't be set because of just like bad luck and other days. And it really happened not just here but in the whole metro area. Same thing happened on July 24th where we really couldn't see record high temperatures be established, despite temperatures in the mid to upper 90s, which was some of the warmest temperatures we've seen in a while. And here's the thing. There's one spot in the metro area that I want to put attention to. Newark saw the hottest August on record. They saw the most 90-plus days in August. 18 days in Newark either hit or exceeded 90 degrees. Meanwhile, in Newark in July, from July 20th to 24th, every single day got over 100 degrees. That's a record long stretch. The high on July 24th of 102 also set a record. But I think what was most noteworthy is that, yes, you've had 4 days in a row where Newark hit 100, but not 5. While driving back from Chicago, it took a very long time. I remember when we left on July 18th, I will actually talk about, we left in very poor weather and we had a lot of delays, including an oil spill that, that was probably caused by the storm. Then the 19th, a heat wave erupts, but we made it to Ohio the first night, then we were in Chicago. By the 20th, we already had to go back to Ohio, and I remember the 21st, 22nd, we were in Hershey. So we came back from Hershey, we had to drive through Newark, and I saw this temperature thing that said 102. It was hot. We wouldn't make it back to my suburb for a few hours later. The high in my suburb was actually in the mid-90s that day, but the temperature dropped to 87 by the time we got off the bus, and with the sun going down, it felt chillier. These kinds of days just felt pleasant when the sun went down, as temperatures were in the mid-80s. And while no records were set, it was still one of the most punishing heat waves for our area. With, of course, Newark making a fair amount of headlines for the record that was accomplished there. And that was Newark for you. So, yeah, don't go to Newark in the summer unless you want to be sweating. Because they are like the hottest of any New York metro recording site, especially in the summer. Meanwhile, July 18th, this was from a storm system that brought tornadoes into Vermont and New Hampshire and a brief landspout tornado along the Hudson River. Further south in New York City, a daily record precipitation of 1.85 inches was logged. Tarrytown saw 4.8 inches of rain. This brought heavy flooding. It caused subway disruptions. It caused sinkholes. The Garden State Mall, that plaza, the parking lot flooded over. It was quite nasty, the flash flooding in the metro area. We had a lot of traffic disruptions. It was a mess. On top of that, while temperatures were constrained only into the low 80s, the dew point surged into the upper 70s, which created a heat index of near 90 degrees as all this happened. And that meant it was stifling humidity when it wasn't pouring rain. It was one of New York's crummiest days of the summer, and it actually brought real disruptions despite no definite property damage and no loss of life, unlike some other flash flood events in the city that we'll be getting to later on in the video. And keep in mind, we had a very dry July before this too. June was below average in terms of precipitation. June 19th was more so record-setting in the Appalachian Mountains as temperatures dropped below freezing. A hiker actually died due to hypothermia in Maine, despite being only a few days before the beginning of summer. And Caribou set their record for the latest state where high temperatures failed to hit 50 degrees. This is exactly 2 years after another highly anomalous event where the eastern Maine was the only place in the country east of the Mississippi River to see a heat advisory. Temperatures hit the mid-90s there, while Florence was kept below 70 degrees Fahrenheit for 43 consecutive hours. It's what we like to call an upside-down temperature map, because you had some cold conditions in the Carolinas, some very hot conditions in Maine. Normally they're meant to be flipped. So you had like June records for heat, June records for cold. It was a mess. But then you had this cold blast make its way down. Now, it wasn't record-setting here in the city. The low of 54 was far from a record, which is still in the upper 40s at that time of year. But LaGuardia, which only hit 56, did actually tie their 1958 record. Records don't go back as far, and I assume that the LaGuardia had like the more perfect scenario to set a record because they were the only site. See, what I lied to you about October 3rd was that Newark did actually tie their record cold high of 52 degrees. Okay, so we didn't really see that much more record-breaking weather. Well, not Central Park itself, with highs in the mid-90s on May 31st. That did actually still set a lot of records across the metro area. Felt more like all-out summer. And it was very interesting to see how exactly that could happen, because that stuff going on is quite rare, especially for late May. Now, was it a daily record in Central Park? No, but it was in a lot of other metro sites. Further to the southeast, school had to end early. This was a case of building heat, but then a backdoor cold front quickly shot temperatures right back down. So after May 31st, Falcon all its summer heat wave. June 1st had more of an April-y to maybe early May kind of vibe going on. Then another storm system that actually brought an EF3 tornado in South Dakota began moving its way over on June 2nd, bringing more rain, but floating temperatures up. After a little bit of curvy-wurvies on June 3rd, nice weather had actually returned to the city, or nice weather-ish had returned to the city by June 4th, 5th, and 6th. Before more instability would occur, but we don't have to talk about that right now. Ew, my shoe just has weird liquid in it. I don't like this feeling. I don't like it at all. Well, this is the consequence of wearing just shoes with holes in them, because you will get a lot of moisture in them. So don't do that. Now, speaking of record highs, May 31st was not the only day to do this. Now, most of the metro area didn't see record highs despite 90-degree temperatures on May 21st. May 22nd did set a record warm low in Central Park of 72 degrees, but those don't really get as much attention. Now, some metro sites did see record highs. I think ice slip also hit 90. That was a record high for the date. So we did see record highs in ice slip on May 21st. Very, very hot day going on. Very, very hot day going on. Way too hot for late May. And keep in mind, this was as Colorado dug out of a big blizzard too. Just after they had like near 90 temperatures. That also almost set a record high. Now, I'm going to have to, unfortunately, begin to speed through this video because there are time constraints and they probably just bored you, but there is actually a lot of stuff that I want to get to. So, I'm going to have to fly through this video and only cover the most important events. On April 14th, Newark and Islip both tied record highs of 73 degrees as a storm system pummeled through the area. This was the warmest day of the year so far and would be the warmest day for a while to come. But in areas where it couldn't hit 80, they would see one of their latest first 80s on record. Not the latest on record, but one of the latest on record. That was on the 14th of April. The 29th of March had a record low temperature at JFK Airport at 24, but the entire metro area either set or tied daily record highs on March 28th as an Arctic intrusion came in. Nobody broke a record low on that day, but the highs did break records everywhere. Central Park was a high of only 33. The one place that tied a record was Newark at 35. Bridgeport and LaGuardia saw highs of only 32. So they actually saw sub-freezing highs. The record cold was widespread across the Northeast and fell from Pennsylvania to Massachusetts. It was a widespread event. There were fatalities with snow squalls involved. Very unfortunate event to have happened. Now, March 6th and 7th also tied record highs in Central Park, and I'm sure broke them elsewhere. 68 on the 6th of March and 74 on the 7th of March. The latter day was when a severe storm that actually killed 7 people in Iowa blew through. There was even a non-tornadic fatality in the western part of New York, and wind gusts did hit the 50s in terms of miles an hour in the city. There were, however, no tornadoes, despite some warnings being issued for said tornadoes. February 23rd to 25th is interesting because even though only a small amount of snow and ice fell on the 25th, it was notable because of some very intense warmth on the 23rd. Surprisingly, a high of 68 degrees in late February is not good enough for Central Park to set a record, and he didn't. However, everywhere else in the metro area did. In Islip, I believe, tied a monthly record high of 68. What got more fame was Bangor setting the record of a monthly high of 65. Nowhere saw a record warm daily low, however, because even though lows that morning across the Northeast were in the balmy upper 40s, temperatures dropped right back down to seasonal averages that night. This included the mid-30s if you lived in the metro area of New York, but to the mid-teens if you lived in parts of Maine. And this is what ultimately allowed for all that cold air to surge down. And this is by midnight, so this wasn't even the next morning. My shoes are wet. I hate this. Anyway, as far as the February stuff goes, a less notable system actually brought more record highs. New Jersey saw some tornadoes due to the system, which is an extremely rare occurrence in February. Now, that system brought a record high and a record warm daily low, 68.49 to the city. But it doesn't have any mention on Wikipedia because the storm itself doesn't. Because the thing is that Oakley got a lot of notability for killing 7 people in various car crashes, amongst other things. The storm kind of lacked that. February 4th did not set any temperature records for New York City. But what it did do was drop the temperature by nearly 20 degrees in an hour. 54 degrees at 7 a.m. to 38 at 8 a.m. Ultimately, during the storm, temperatures fell from 57 to 26 by midnight and would bottom out at 19 the next morning. Now, in January, we had one of the biggest blizzards on record for ice slip. 4 Long Islanders were killed due to the storm. Central Park only saw 8.5 inches, but that was still a lot of snow for them. And this is a big blizzard that actually barreled through our area. And were there other stuff in January? Yes, but there weren't really any record-breaking temperatures for warmth or mainly for cold, surprisingly, despite how cold it was and how warm the first 2 days were. I mean, yes, January 2nd did see some record highs in some metro sites, and the temperatures there were mainly only in the upper 50s, which is never good enough to set a record high or a record low. Now, could it be good enough to set a record cold high? Yes. Record warm low? Yes. But for an outright record high, record low, the upper 50s is almost never going to be good enough. It's very rare where it will, in fact, be warm enough. Anyway, so as far as December actually goes, because yes, we do have to go back there, there wasn't that much notable stuff. There was some ups and downs. Like on December 16th, right before the ratio would begin to crumble apart and bring some record highs here. A record warm low set at 54. LaGuardia set a record high of 62 the next day. Before the sun even rose at 6 o'clock in the morning. That was extremely unusual. And that was the 16th and 17th. On the 11th, the record warm daily high was set at 7:30 p.m. of 67 in Central Park and surprisingly 69 degrees in Newark. So that was very unusual, very uncommon occurrence. And winds would hit 50 miles an hour through the metro area as the remnants of the tornado outbreak begin to battle through, although there were no tornadoes. As far as the other notable weather, there wasn't too much going on in November. October did see those big storms barrel down. On October 26th, the nor'easter dumped about 3 inches of rain. And with another storm coming through 4 days later, New York City saw their wettest final week of October on record. Also, we saw a record October streak of lows in the 60s. 13 consecutive nights in that temperature range. Newark ultimately saw the hottest October on record, although not for CPK. Also, while not true for the entire metro area, Central Park itself did not see a temperature in the 40s until October 18th, the second latest data on record, and the first time we saw the 40s since May 31st, which actually was one of the later dates of Central Park to be in the 40s in recent history. I think the last time we hit the 40s in June was 2000, despite a temperature of 50 degrees on June 2nd, 2015. So ultimately, this only came one day off from being the first 40s in June in decades. And that's about how October was. Also, the low of only 47 degrees for the entire month was the warmest on record for be the highest low, highest minimum, lowest, the absolute coldest temperature in a month. That was the warmest temperature for October. It's hard to explain, but that was what happened. It happened 3 times during the month. October 19th, so the day after the low in the 40s, happened on October 24th, happened on October 29th. But that's it. The city, however, will not see a record low amount of time to hitting the 40s in October because besides the 18th, the 23rd and 24th also hit the 40s. September was really bland in terms of weather with one exception. Obviously, Ida brought near record amounts of rain to the city, 7.13 inches. The wettest hour on record for the city at 3.15 inches of rain. It would actually kill about 50 people in the metro area due to the heavy rain flash flooding brought on by the system. And would be one of New York's deadliest storms on record, as it quickly but devastatingly swept through our area, bringing, again, copious rain, winds gusting up to 50 miles an hour, but that wasn't even the main concern. And that was following the second wettest summer on record in the city too. Had Ida arrived a day earlier, it would have been the wettest summer on record in the city, topping the record of 2011. In addition, Henri dumped over 4 inches of rain in a single night, and brought a grand total of 7 inches of rain. I'm not sure if that amount of rain was a daily record, but I know it postponed the concert. In addition, July would also become our third wettest on record. The wettest on record for New York State as a whole. And before Elsa, a major flash flood broke out, causing massive disruptions in the city. 2.27 inches of rain fell in a single hour. And in during Elsa, another 1.5 inches fell on a storm-weary city. Also on July 3rd, we saw our first low in the 50s in July in 12 years, since 2009. And considering that on average, it's supposed to get to 58, 57 in July, that's a sign of how bad global warming has become, and a sign as to why this needs to be taken very seriously by people. As far as June goes, we had 2 4-day heat waves. None of the days broke a record, not even a 98-degree day in June, because surprisingly, a June 30th has seen that before. However, a monthly record is broken in Newark at 102 degrees. Absolutely astounding for late June. And keep in mind, this is as the Pacific Northwest heat wave was still on, so you had anomalous warmth in both parts of the country. Highly unusual to see such record warm temperatures in both parts of the country, especially with the middle of the country being quite cold. And that cold would actually trigger some not great weather. I mean, a tornado in DC actually forced a Nationals-Dodgers game to be postponed. Not postponed, suspended. This is getting painful. So, in late May, New York City would see about 2.5 inches of rain. But it was a high temperatures that were record-worthy. So it tied a record in 1884 for the latest streak of 4 nights in a row in the 40s. May 6th. I'm thinking of 2022, goddammit. May 28th, May 29th, May 30th, May 31st. The highs also were noteworthy. 51 degrees tied the record cold high on May 29th. 51 degrees then broke it on May 30th by 4 degrees. I'm not sure what it was like in other parts of the metro. Heavy rain, crummy weather. This is Memorial Day weekend, when it was supposed to be the unofficial start of summer, had an almost winter-like vibe to it instead. Almost winter-like vibe to it. Had this occurred just 2 days later, we would have set a record for the coldest high temperature in the month of June. The coldest high in June in the city is 52 degrees, and had this came 1 day later with the exact same characteristics, it would have been a high of 51, which would have broke the record for a monthly maximum. We have not seen monthly records be broken in the city, at least on the cold side, since the start of the century. And keep in mind, this is just the weekend after anomalous warmth in the city. March 26th was notable because our first high in the 80s in 23 years and the high of 82 also broke the daily record for high temperatures this time of year. So a stark contrast between March 26th in 2021 and March 28th in 2022, obviously. Stark contrast. Not a monthly record high, but it did actually come close. Then in hang on. Then I think earlier on in March, did we see anything? No, we did not. February was our 8th snowiest February on record. We had a record snowfall to start the month, 15 inches of snow about. Heavy winter storm, dumped mostly rain in Boston. That's why New York City and Boston ended up with equal snowfall amounts. It was because of Orlena barreling the city while sparing Boston, despite Boston being only 1 degree higher for most of the event than the city. And even then, Boston being 1 degree higher than a city is not exactly the most common thing. And it has to do with storm track. And also the fact that there was recently very cold air in place. Because, yes, there was a bit of a cold wave going on beforehand. In the lead up to this storm. Now, January was pretty dull weather in the end. Christmas Day did not set a record for warmth, however, or a record for rain, surprisingly. But we still saw about an inch of rain. It was record warm and record wet in several places. Wind gusts, 67 miles an hour. Lots of power outages on Christmas. And while the temperature did hit the early 60s in the early part of the day, it froze by night. It froze by night. So that was about as annoying as a Christmas storm can get, and it melted some very heavy snow that might have broken a record for the daily snowfall. I know it was the all-time snowiest storm on record in Binghamton, but in Central Park we got spared with only 10.5 inches. And this storm melted all the snow and ruined a white Christmas. We have not seen a white Christmas in the city since 2009. And in order for it to be white Christmas, it has to be at least an inch of snow or more on the ground at 7 a.m. So, a little before sunrise. Now, November 2020 was the warmest November on record. We had 6 days in a row with highs in the 70s, which is near record territory. November 2020, I'm trying to remember what happened else that was notable, but I can't really think of anything. It did freeze on Halloween. The earliest freeze in the city in over 3 decades. However, not a daily record. The daily record is 29, and this state only hit 32. No actual record lows were set, though Albany came extremely close. July set a record for the warmest low temperature of any month on record. The coldest it got all month, a mere 67 degrees. So it was just balmy the whole day, the whole month round, and it was one of the top 10 hottest. Did I mention for July 2022 how every single day in New York City had highs in the 80s? Guess I forgot. I should have mentioned that. That would have been a good caveat. So, since I'm almost done, now I want to touch on the really, really important weather that happened. So we're going to be skipping a lot of stuff, but you have to bear with me. A lot of very notable stuff will have to be skipped if I want to get to the end of this, which I do. So in April, the highest temperature in the city was 68 degrees. No 70s in the city in April for the first time since the 1940. And on May 9th, not only was the coldest May temperature in over a century set, but a trace of snow fell, which tied for the latest trace on record in New York City. And this is after one of New York City's least snowy winters as well. Temperatures hit the upper 60s on 2 weekend days in January, making it feel more like May. And in Boston, a monthly record was set on the latter day, just before a decaying tornado outbreak moved its way over. In October 2019, the second day of the month saw temperatures hit 93 degrees in the city, one of the highest temperatures on record for October. A daily record high was set as well, in the first 90s in the city in about 8 decades since 1941. Islip tied a monthly high of 88, And LaGuardia tied the state record high of 95, and obviously broke their own monthly record high, but tied the state record high for October of 95 degrees. On May 12th or 13th, something like that, a daily record low high of 48 degrees was set as a nor'easter barreled through the area. January 31st tied a record cold high of the day at a frigid 16 degrees. November 15th saw the earliest 6-inch snowfall in the city, which caused massive traffic disruptions across the metro area. April 2nd saw 5.5 inches of snow, the heaviest April snow in the city in 3.5 decades, about. And also the Yankees had to postpone their home opener. The April ultimately became the coldest April in the city since 1975. Can you believe that? 1975. March saw multiple nor'easters that also dumped inches upon inches of snow. And now after on February 21st, New York City set its all-time February record high of 78 degrees, and LaGuardia set the state record high of 79 degrees, while Newark saw their earliest 80-degree reading on record. And this was, keep in mind, after a painful polar vortex through the city. After a painful polar vortex in the city was when these records were finally, for warmth, finally able to be set. November 10th to 11th, back-to-back record lows in the city for the first time in over 2 decades, in the mid-20s. Similar conditions would occur on November 12th and 13th, 2019, also making record lows. 2017 saw the hottest October on record in the city. 2018 saw the hottest February. But previously, before that, was 2017. It also had the second hottest April. And as much as I'd love to continue, I have to end it now. But thank you for watching this 40-plus minute documentary.